The bell tolls again. Its sound rolls across the damp night air like a wound reopening, raw and unhealed. Each vibration crawls along the wooden beams of homes, seeps through the shutters, and rests heavy upon the breath of the town. The bell of death is merciless, impartial, unrelenting. No one dares mistake its voice for a call to worship. It is not heaven that listens tonight. It is the grave. Inside a narrow chamber, the air trembles with the faint sputter of a candle. Its flame leans and wavers, as if recoiling from what it illuminates. The wax drips in slow surrender, mirroring the body that lies cold upon the straw mattress. A young man, no older than 20. His lips cracked, his skin the ashen pallor of stone. Beside him kneels his mother, her fingers clutching his hand as though she might pull him back from the abyss. She whispers broken prayers in Latin, but each word is brittle, splintering under the weight of grief. Sanct Deus, Sanct Fortis, yet even as her lips move, her eyes betray the truth. Heaven has turned its face away. The scent of herbs fills the room, boiled rosemary, wormwood, sage. It should cleanse, should purify, but instead it clings bitterly to the throat, mingling with the sharper stench of sweat and decay. In the corner, two physicians stand in silence. Their robes are dark, their faces hidden behind the long, bird-like masks stuffed with crushed petals and vinegar-soaked cloth. Their very presence is a proclamation. There is no cure, only ritual, only delay. The beaks they wear resemble carrion feeders, scavengers circling the dying. They murmur of corrupted air, of poisoned mists rising from the earth, of invisible vapors that slither into lungs like serpents. Yet beneath their words lingers fear, the knowledge that even their talismans cannot shield them from the fate they witness nightly. Beneath the rafters, in the shadows no candle reaches, rats move swiftly. Their claws scrape softly across wood, their sleek bodies vanishing between cracks and straw. Unseen but ever present, they are heralds of the unseen plague. Each scurry, each twitch of a tail, carries more weight than 1,000 sermons shouted from cathedral pulpits. Outside, the streets whisper with their own mourning. The town has strewn straw across its cobbled alleys, not out of reverence but necessity. The carts must move silently through the night, bearing their cargo of bodies to hastily dug pits beyond the walls. The straw muffles the rattle of wheels, but it cannot conceal the deep grooves they carve into the earth. Scars that will remain long after the flesh they carried has turned to dust. The marketplace stands deserted, stalls abandoned, apples rotting where they were dropped. A lone dog noses through the refuse but finds no hand bold enough to shoo it away. Men in woolen cloaks pass each other like phantoms, heads bowed, cloaks drawn tight. They do not meet each other's eyes, for in this season even a glance feels dangerous, as though doom might pass from gaze to gaze. The silence between them is heavier than words. And yet, the plague is no respecter of walls or prayers. It seeps through iron gates, into stone keeps, through abbey cloisters and peasant hovels alike. In monasteries, monks chant psalms over the dead until their own voices falter and their own bodies fall silent. In castles, noblemen order tapestries hung over windows to block the bad air, only to watch their heirs wither in candlelit chambers. The shadow coils everywhere, faceless yet intimate. In the cathedral, the bishop raises his trembling hands to heaven, declaring this scourge the judgment of God. His voice echoes from the vaulted ceilings, but even he falters when the bell tolls again and he counts how many of his own priests lie cold beneath white sheets. Faith itself begins to fracture under the weight of unanswered prayers. Some cling tighter to the cross, others turn their backs, whispering that God has abandoned them. What lingers is not only the stench of death, nor the fever that burns the body. It is the silence after the bell stops, a silence so thick it presses upon the chest like a stone. In that silence, every man, every woman, every child feels the truth settle within their bones. Life is no more enduring than the fragile wax of a candle. One breath, one moment of warmth, and then a slow, steady melting into nothingness. Yet even amid this despair, the world does not halt. A father sharpens his plow at dawn, though his field lies untended. A child chases a moth through an empty street, her laughter piercing the quiet for a fleeting heartbeat before her mother pulls her inside. Somewhere, a scribe bends over a manuscript, ink staining his fingers, determined to write words that might outlast the pestilence. The shadow spreads, but so too does the stubborn pulse of survival. Still, the night deepens. The torches on the walls flicker, their flames bowing low in the damp air. Beyond the gate, the ground grows heavy with the weight of the dead. A mass grave yawns open, filled with silence, filled with unanswered prayers. Above it all, the moon peers coldly through a veil of clouds, indifferent, eternal. And then another bell tolls. Its echo rolls outward again, across roofs and fields, across stone and straw. Another life extinguished, another soul delivered into the dark. Each toll is both an ending and a summons, a reminder that the shadow does not rest. But somewhere beyond the walls, beyond the reach of tonight's bell, the shadow prepares to move further still, into new towns, new cities, across rivers and mountains. For this is not a plague bound by borders. This is a tide, and tides do not stop until they have claimed all shores. The candle in the chamber gutters once more, its flame shrinking to a trembling thread of light. A final drip of wax falls, hissing upon the brass. The mother bows her head over her son's still hand. In the silence that follows, the night itself seems to hold its breath. The shadow has awakened, and it will not sleep again. A candle burns low in the vaulted silence of the monastery, its light fragile against the ocean of shadow. The wick hisses faintly as if whispering a final prayer, melted wax pooling at the base like frozen tears. Around it, the brothers kneel in rows, cowls drawn deep, their voices rising and falling in solemn psalms that echo through the cavernous dark. Each note lingers, like smoke refusing to vanish, filling the air with a trembling kind of faith. But behind closed doors, another ritual unfolds. One far from holy, one that reeks of vinegar and iron. A novice bends over a wooden table, his young hands trembling as he lays out strips of linen, boiled and stained, like shrouds waiting for the dead. The room stinks of sweat, blood, and fear. The sick lie in cells once meant for prayer, their coughs rattling through the stone corridors like hammer strikes, relentless, merciless. The sound reverberates until it seems the monastery itself coughs with them, stone groaning under the weight of unseen pestilence. The air tastes of smoke, heavy and sharp, for fires of juniper and pine are stoked day and night in desperate hope of cleansing. But smoke cannot banish what has no body, no form, no face. The brothers walk through the haze with eyes red and swollen, whispering prayers half believed. The great crucifix glimmers in the dimness, yet even Christ on the cross appears shadowed by doubt. Faith and fear wrestle in silence, locked in a battle with no victor. Some whisper that this is God's wrath made flesh, punishment for sins unconfessed. Others murmur of foreign ships, of cursed silks arriving at harbors, of merchants whose hands carried more than spice and coin. The stories shift like smoke, impossible to seize, yet heavy with dread. Still, the priests continue their processions, bearing crucifixes and bowls of holy water. The bells toll with every step, tolling not just for the sick, but for all. Each chime a funeral, each vibration a reminder of mortality. The novices are ordered to scrape the walls with lime, to scour the wood with brine, to wash the stones until their hands bleed. Yet no matter how they scrape, the stench of decay seeps back through, unyielding, a ghost that cannot be banished. The very air has turned traitor, sweet once with incense, now foul with rot. In the refectory silence reigns. The brothers sit before bowls of thin broth, black bread coarse and stale, the simplest of meals. No one eats with ease. Each hand trembles before lifting a crust of bread to the mouth, as though poison lurked within. The sound of chewing is louder than the prayers that precede it. Hunger knots their stomachs, yet fear tightens harder still. To eat is to risk, to starve is to surrender. Beyond the cloister walls, the world seems no safer. Travelers arrive, cloaks heavy with rain and rumor. Their words pierce like arrows. Villages emptied overnight, markets deserted, cities shrouded in silence broken only by weeping. Some tell of carts piled high with corpses, rolled through streets where dogs and ravens feed freely. Others whisper of whole families locked inside their homes, doors barred not by faith but by fear. The monastery listens, but its walls offer no refuge. Beneath the psalms, beneath the rituals, a quiet despair takes root. The brothers know it, though none dare speak it. Scripture cannot halt the creeping shadow, nor can science, with its powders and tinctures, its boiled herbs and burning herbs. Knowledge falters, like a candle flame bending low, flickering before the void. The monastery, once a sanctuary of learning, now seems only a tomb, its books gathering dust while death writes its own scripture in flesh. In the scriptorium, a single monk continues to write. His quill scratches across parchment, ink pooling like black blood. He copies the words of saints, yet his hand shakes, smudging letters into darkness. Each word feels like a futile defense against something wordless, something vast. He pauses, dips the quill again, and whispers a prayer not to God, but to time itself. Let this pass. Let there be morning again. In the cloister yard, the novices dig shallow graves, their shovels biting the earth with dull rhythm. Ravens circle above, their cries sharp against the silence. A single bird descends, black feathers glistening against the pale sky, and perches on the roof beam above the cloister. Its presence is unsettling, an omen embodied. The brothers glance upward, but none dare chase it away. To frighten it would be to acknowledge what it represents. That death has already entered these walls, patient, invisible, watching. At night, the chants continue, low and mournful, filling the vaulted chamber like a tide of sorrow. The candle flames sway, their light quivering as if afraid to burn. Some monks lie restless, whispering psalms into their own sleeves, lips cracked with fever. Others stare at the ceiling, listening for the sound of another cough, another groan, another footstep that might never come. Silence is as frightening as sound now. A novice rises in the night and slips into the chapel. He kneels before the altar, trembling, his fingers clutching at the hem of his robe. Tears carve pale lines through soot and sweat on his face. His prayer is broken, fragmented, a plea not for salvation but for understanding. Why? The word echoes softly, unanswered, dissolving into the stone. The only reply is the hiss of the candle wick, the faint shuffle of feet in distant halls, the breath of shadows. Dawn comes gray and muted. The sky, once a dome of brilliant blue above the monastery, now hangs pale and sickly, veiled with thin mist. The raven remains perched, black against the light, a living emblem of what cannot be seen, yet cannot be denied. The monks step into the cloister, their feet dragging on cold stone, their eyes hollow. They gather once more for prayer, voices breaking, words heavy. Yet beneath the rhythm of their chants lies something unspoken, the knowledge that faith cannot bind what walks unseen. The monastery waits. It breathes. It endures, yet only barely. Its walls tremble with each cough, each tolling bell, each rumor borne on the wind. And still, in its heart, the candle burns, wick bending, flame faltering but not extinguished. A question lingers in the smoke, unanswered, unresolved. How long before the light dies? How long before the cloistered walls crumble, and the silence of death becomes the only prayer left to speak? The raven shifts its wings and cries once more, sharp and final. The sound cuts the air like a blade, carrying into the gray horizon where other stories unfold. Stories of towns where no bells ring, where no candles burn, where hope itself lies buried. And it is toward those places the story now turns. The harbor wakes before the sun. Lanterns swing on crooked posts, their flames trembling in the breath of the sea. The cries of fishmongers rise with the morning tide, sharp and insistent, woven with the groan of rigging and the clatter of carts on stone. Salt stings the air, thick with the mingling smells of tar, brine, and roasted chestnuts. Ships crowd the docks, their hulls scarred by distance, their sails heavy with damp from oceans crossed. From their bellies spill treasures, bolts of silk shimmering like water, barrels of spice breathing fire into the cold, and wines deep as blood. The city beats with commerce, alive, restless, unyielding. Yet beneath this tapestry of life, a shadow slips ashore. It makes no proclamation, no thunder of war drums. Instead, it comes in silence, born in the breath of rats hidden in the grain, clinging to the hulls, nesting in the ropes. A darker cargo unseen, waiting for its hour. A boy stands on the quay, chestnuts popping and hissing over his little brazier. His hands are black with soot, his laugh quick and bright as he calls to passing sailors. He does not see the shadow. He does not hear the cough, wet and ragged, spilling from an alley where the gulls will above, restless. He does not see the tavern door slam shut as a sailor collapses within, his skin swelling in dark, unnatural knots. Life carries on, blind to the first tremor of an approaching storm. The plague does not arrive with fire. It arrives with whispers. A seamstress, bent over her needlework, feels her breath falter, rattling in her chest like parchment torn in two. A priest, once the shepherd of his flock, now shrinks back, hands clasped but unwilling to bless, terrified of the touch of skin. Death moves through the streets not with a march, but with hesitation, each silence heavier than the last. At first, the city resists with ritual. Watchmen drag barrels of pitch, pouring fire into the gutters, praying that smoke and flame can scour what prayer cannot. Officials command doors to be marked with crosses, red strokes bleeding into oak, silent cries to keep the curious away. Children press their ears to these painted doors, straining to hear what lies within. Only muffled coughs, broken whispers, and then nothing. The harbor, once roaring, grows muted. Sails furl and rot. Ropes slacken and sway with no hands to tighten them. The ships wait motionless, as if aware that their cargo has delivered more than goods. The gulls scream over emptiness, their wings flashing white in the dim light, circling above streets where laughter once rang. But sickness is not the only invader. The plague unravels more than flesh. It gnaws at trust. Neighbors watch one another with suspicion. A shared loaf of bread becomes a sentence of death. Brothers close their doors against brothers. Families bolt windows against the very kin they once welcomed. The hearth grows cold, for no one dares share warmth. Fear becomes its own contagion, spreading faster than fever. In council chambers, guild masters argue. Some demand the gates be barred, the ships turned away, the market silenced. But the clink of coin outweighs caution. Trade must flow, they say, even if death rides its current. And so the gates remain open, as sickness seeps deeper, richer than any treasure the ships could bring. The boy with chestnuts vanishes from the quay. His brazier grows cold, ash scattered by the wind. The sailors still mutter in the taverns, though their numbers thin with each dawn. The seamstress's stool sits empty, her unfinished cloth sagging from the loom. And still, the gulls wheel and cry above the warehouses, scavengers of silence. The city that once pulsed with the rhythm of trade now beats like a hollow chest, its breath shallow, its heart faltering. Fires burn in the streets, but the smoke no longer smells of cleansing pitch. It carries the bitter tang of fear. Bells toll too often, their mournful sound absorbed by walls painted red with warning. The plague is patient. It does not strike in one blow but gnaws at the edges, hollowing out the center. And in that hollow the true terror is born, not only in the bodies laid to rest, but in the slow erosion of trust, the shattering of bonds, the silence that weighs heavier than any cry. The harbor stands as a graveyard of masts, their timbers creaking like gallows against the gray sky. Once they brought riches. Now they stand as monuments to folly, witnesses to a truth too late to grasp. Death does not always march with banners unfurled. Sometimes it comes as a whisper, quiet as the sea at dawn. And in that whisper lies the beginning of an end not just of lives, but of faith, of order, of the fragile threads that bound one soul to another. The gulls wheel overhead, the ropes sway untended, and the silence of the port deepens, waiting for the next chapter to be written, not in gold or silk or spice, but in ash. In the stillness of night, the chamber is lit only by the weak glow of candles, their flames wavering as if reluctant to remain in a place so heavy with dread. The Lord lies restless beneath mounds of fur, his breath a shallow rattle that clings to the stone walls like a curse. The air is thick with the sour tang of vinegar-soaked cloths, hung like ghostly banners from iron hooks in a desperate ward against corruption. They sway faintly, stirred by unseen draughts, a slow and mocking dance. Servants move carefully, each footfall a whisper, their faces drained of color, lips moving in furtive prayers too soft to be heard. They draw the tapestries tighter against the windows, as though cloth alone could bar the creeping cold, or the darker intrusion pressing from beyond. Outside, the fields lie abandoned. The furrows gape like open wounds in the earth, left raw and empty when the harvest was forsaken in panic. Stalks of grain rot where they fell, never cut nor gathered, while crows pick at the remnants, their cries harsh against the silence. Beyond, wolves circle the edges of the estate, their howls carried on the wind, a dirge for the living, an anthem for the dying. Hunger has made them fearless, for the villages that once rang with clamor now echo with nothing but absence. Within the chamber, the physician steadies himself. His face is hidden behind a leather mask shaped like the beak of a carrion bird, its hollow eyes reflecting the wavering candlelight. In trembling hands, he mixes a bitter draught of wormwood, garlic, and bile-green herbs. The cup rattles against its saucer before it touches the Lord's cracked lips. Each swallow is agony, each gasp weaker than the last. The physician knows his measures are futile, yet still he prescribes them because to stop would be to admit surrender. And surrender cannot be named in this house, though death already lingers at its threshold. The family waits in the great hall, where once laughter had risen like music and the clamor of feasts shook the rafters. Now the long oak table stands bare but for rough rye bread, its crust hard as stone, and thin broth that carries little more than the memory of meat. Honeyed wine, once poured in silver goblets, is gone. Only cold water, drawn from the well, fills their cups. They eat in silence, the scrape of spoons against wood louder than any voice. Shadows climb the vaulted beams above, stretching like silent intruders that cannot be banished. In the servants' quarters, fear is its own contagion. Whispers coil through the darkness like smoke. Some murmur of unseen vapors poisoning the air, a miasma drifting from the marshes and settling into lungs. Others speak of God's anger, of sins unconfessed, of curses carried by traitors' ships from far and foreign shores. A chambermaid swears she saw a black shape move across the fields at dusk, neither man nor beast, but a shadow unmoored from flesh. At night, the servants clutch rosaries until the beads carve welts into their palms, praying that morning will arrive, and half disbelieving that it will. The chapel becomes the only refuge left. The priest raises incense into the air, its sweet smoke curling upwards, carrying pleas too desperate to be ignored. The people kneel in the flickering glow of candle stubs, their faces drawn, their eyes hollow. The priest's voice cracks as he begs for mercy, for protection, for an answer from a heaven that remains shrouded in silence. Each prayer floats like ash, dissolving into nothingness, leaving behind only the raw ache of abandonment. Yet the plague has no ear for prayers, no eye for wealth, no regard for rank. It crosses thresholds of stone and mud with equal ease, stripping away the illusions of safety. The velvet cloak guards no better than the peasant's rough wool. The manor, with its banners and bloodlines, is no more shielded than the thatched hovels at its edge. A sickness without master, without law, it levels all. Titles, crowns, and coats of arms lie meaningless in its wake. The manor itself grows ghost-like, a shell of its former power. Where once the clang of the forge and the laughter of huntsmen filled the courtyards, there is now only silence broken by the caw of crows and the restless creak of shutters. The great hearth, which had roared with warmth during feasts of boar and venison, burns weakly. A few embers cling to life, glowing like dying hearts that refuse, stubbornly, to fade. The walls seem to breathe with the weight of sorrow, stone pressing inward as though mourning its own inhabitants. In the Lord's chamber, the end draws near. The physician leans close, though he dares not touch. The fir mounds rise and fall faintly, each breath thinner, each pause between them longer. The family gathers, their faces shadowed, their eyes rimmed red, their hands clutching each other with more desperation than affection. No one dares speak the truth aloud, that this lineage, built over centuries, may end tonight in silence. And then it comes. A long exhale, ragged, uneven, drawn from lungs that can no longer bear their burden. The sound is small, almost fragile, yet it echoes like a bell tolling across the estate. The silence that follows is heavier than stone. No wail rises, no cry of mourning. Only the creak of the rafters, the rustle of tapestries, and beyond the windows, the unbroken howl of wolves. The servants bow their heads. The family stands motionless, their grief too sharp, too immense for words. In that moment, it feels as though time itself holds its breath, waiting. The manor has become a tomb, not of stone, but of memory, of lineage, of laughter swallowed whole by shadows. And as the candles gutter low, their light shrinking into fragile sparks, the estate is left with an absence more suffocating than presence. A secret written not in words, but in silence. A silence that will spread, as surely as the sickness itself. For beyond these walls, others wait their turn. Other manors, other villages, other kingdoms, each trembling on the same precipice, each whispering the same unanswered prayers. The plague does not end here. It only begins. The clang of iron splits the dawn. Once, twice, thrice. A hollow, metallic cry that ricochets through the cottages and fields. More funeral toll than morning call. No rooster answers it. No plowman stirs. Only the damp earth exhales its chill, heavy breath rising like smoke from soil that will not be turned today, nor tomorrow. The villagers emerge reluctantly, shadows pulling themselves from thresholds. Cloaks pulled tight, eyes downcast. They gather toward the square as though drawn not by choice but by gravity, by the inevitability of grief. A cart waits there, its wheels caked with yesterday's mud, its boards darkened by rain and darker stains that rain cannot wash away. Upon it lies the stillness of the night past. Bodies gathered, limbs slack, eyes closed or open but unseeing. A man in a hooded cloak lifts them with hands like iron tongs, rough and unflinching. He places them one by one upon the cart, arranging them not with tenderness but with the efficiency of one who has seen too many. The bodies dangle, marionettes whose strings have been cut. Children watch from behind doorframes, their faces pale, their fingers clinging to crude wooden crosses strung on fraying cords. They do not cry. They do not ask. Their silence is older than their years. The healer moves among them. Her apron is stained not with blood but with herbs, the green-brown residue of poultices and teas that no longer bring relief. She carries bundles of sage, rosemary, lavender, fragrant offerings against the sourness of decay that thickens in the air. At each door she pauses, murmuring words learned from her grandmother, words that now sound more like incantations than medicine. She tucks sprigs above lintels, hangs charms in doorways, yet even as smoke curls and scents mingle, the heaviness of death lingers, unmoved. From the church comes the toll of the bell, its voice weary, faltering. The priest pulls the rope with arms that tremble under the weight of repetition. Each strike rolls across the empty fields, where once laughter and labor rose with the sun. The bell is no longer a call to prayer. It is a declaration that yet another has fallen, another family left hollow. Suspicion grows like mold in the damp silence. Neighbors avert their eyes. Whispers curdle into accusations. A widow is seen at her threshold with a black cat. Soon stones fly, sharp and merciless, until fur and flesh crumple in the dust. A beggar stumbles into the square, rag-wrapped, hungry, pleading for bread. But bread is gone, and mercy thinner still. They drive him into the forest, shouting that his rags carry the pestilence. Fear turns the village inward, each family retreating behind doors, bolting shutters, guarding scraps of grain as though trust itself were a disease. Once there were feast days, tables bright with bread, ale foaming in clay mugs, songs leaping like sparks from fire to fire. Now only the memory lingers, fragile as mist at dawn, dissolving before it can be grasped. The fields that once answered with song now echo only with the caw of crows and the hollow groan of the bell. Yet beneath despair lies a truth too sharp to speak. Survival demands cruelty. It demands the exile of the weak, the suspicion of the different, the sacrifice of compassion. It demands that the living turn away from the dead, lest grief pull them into the same pit. The cart creaks forward, its wheels grinding through mud. The sound is slow, deliberate, like teeth crushing bone. Rain fills the furrows left behind, water gathering in shallow graves that mirror the sky. Villagers turn away as it passes, some making the sign of the cross, others spitting to ward off evil. None step closer, none offer a hand. The healer lingers at the last cottage, her hand pressed to the worn wood of the door. She whispers one final prayer, though her voice is thin, almost trembling into silence. Behind that door a family lies still, the last of them taken in the night. She knows no herbs will cleanse this place. No charm will turn aside what stalks unseen. She leaves the sprig anyway, a fragile green against the gray. The square empties. The clang of the pot has fallen silent. Only the echo of the cart's wheels remains, fading into the distance where the road bends and the forest begins. Smoke curls weakly from a handful of chimneys, but it smells more of damp wood than of cooking. Hunger gnaws louder than fire crackles. The children vanish into shadows. The healer walks slowly, as though each step pulls her deeper into the earth's weight. The village is not merely dying. It is unraveling, piece by piece, bond by bond, until the very memory of what it was begins to fray. Names once spoken in laughter are now muttered in dread. Places once alive with trade and song are abandoned, locked away, surrendered. What remains is silence, heavier than any bell, thicker than any smoke. A silence that presses against walls, seeps into marrow, clings to the soul like frost. And yet, in that silence, a question lingers, unspoken but relentless. How much can a people lose before they cease to be a people at all? The bell tolls once more, distant now, muffled by fog. Its last note hangs in the gray morning like a breath that will not release. And as the sound fades, the fields wait, the crows wait, the forest waits. The chapter closes not with the clang of iron, but with absence, the absence of voices, of laughter, of trust. An emptiness vast as the sky, into which the next story will inevitably step, like a figure emerging from mist. The fortress stands against twilight like a beast refusing to die. Its towers rise from the river's edge, their silhouettes smeared across trembling water, black and broken, as if the castle itself were drowning in its reflection. Lanterns glow in high windows, but they are not lights of warmth. Only hollow flames, staring eyes in the skull of a decaying giant. The air tastes of iron and damp moss. Wind curls through the banners, frayed fabrics sighing like old lungs. Somewhere, a raven beats its wings and vanishes into the fog. Across the drawbridge, a boy is dragged. His arms are bound, rope cutting grooves into his wrists. He stumbles once, twice, knees striking timber, yet the guards do not slow. They haul him as one might haul refuse, a burden already condemned. The gate above groans open, the chains clattering like laughter from unseen demons. When it slams shut, the sound is not simply wood and iron. It is judgment, a final seal, as if heaven itself had closed its doors. The boy's name is not spoken, not by the guards, not by the onlookers hidden in shadowed alcoves, whispering like rats. To them he is no longer a mason's apprentice, no longer a pair of young hands that once lifted stone with reverence. He is accusation given flesh. He is blame made visible. His master lies beneath rubble, crushed by a collapse that the boy did not cause. But innocence is fragile in such halls, and guilt is easy mortar. It fills the cracks where truth cannot reach. He is led through corridors where time itself has gnawed the walls. Mortar crumbles at the edges. Ivy creeps in with a hunger more patient than any army. Once, these stones were lifted skyward with hope, shaped by men who believed fortresses could outlast grief, famine, fire. Now the fortress devours itself, its beauty drowned by rot. The boy feels each draft, each shiver of the stones, and wonders if they remember his touch. He had carried lime dust on his skin, had watched arches rise like prayers, had believed he was part of something eternal. That belief dies with every step deeper into shadow. The dungeon exhales damp earth. It reeks of things forgotten. The clang of chains sways against silence. Metal kissing stone with a rhythm that feels too deliberate, too watchful. The guards push him into a narrow cell, no larger than a grave left open. Torchlight flickers once across his face, then withdraws. The door slams. Darkness folds around him like a shroud. Alone, he presses his bound hands to the wall. His fingers trace the seams of stone, as if reading a scripture of betrayal. Each groove cuts him with memory. The weight of chisels, the rasp of files, the sound of hammers ringing like bells across scaffolds. He remembers bread, hot from the hearth, shared with his master after long hours. He remembers pride swelling in his chest as the skeleton of a cathedral took form, ribs of stone arching toward heaven. That pride is now a dagger. Every memory is a wound that bleeds inward. He sinks against the wall, rope-biting skin, and listens to the silence. But silence is not empty here. It is crowded. It breathes. The fortress carries the ghosts of those who entered and never left, their murmurs weaving with the draft that curls through cracks. Somewhere water drips, steady as a heartbeat. Somewhere a rat scratches, reminding him that life in its lowest form always survives. Hours dissolve, perhaps days. The boy counts them not by light, for there is none, but by hunger. His stomach knots, his lips split, his throat grows raw with thirst. He begins to hum, not to comfort himself, but to remember. A tune his mother once sang as she kneaded dough, soft as flour falling through fingers. The sound trembles, frail, fragile. It threads through the stones like smoke. For a moment the dungeon listens. For a moment even the fortress seems to pause. The melody falters. His voice cracks. He presses his forehead to the wall and lets the last note dissolve into silence. But the silence feels changed. No longer a tomb, but a listener. The song lingers, faint as dust, defiant as fire that refuses to die. And in that defiance, something survives. Outside, the river moves as though indifferent. Barges pass, heavy with grain and wool, their lanterns bobbing like small moons upon the black current. None who steer them know of the boy, none care. They feed cities, not prisoners. The river does not pause for one condemned soul. It carries on eternal, carrying with it the weight of a world that builds, trades, forgets. Yet within the fortress, time curls differently. The boy dreams with his eyes open. He imagines stone bending, mortar whispering secrets, arches collapsing again and again, his master's cry buried beneath dust. He dreams of his own body rotting here, forgotten like countless others. But then he dreams of hands, his hands, chiseling once more, lifting stone not for prisons, but for bridges, for places where men might cross rather than be confined. His dreams swing between despair and longing, between the grave he inhabits and the sky he once touched. The dungeon is a place of endings, yet within it he begins something else. Not freedom, not absolution, but defiance. Each breath he draws is rebellion. Each hum of his mother's song is a spark. The fortress, built to stand against all enemies, cannot silence memory, cannot kill song. And though the walls are thicker than any hope, they tremble, ever so faintly, with the rhythm of a boy who refuses to forget himself. Above, the lanterns in the high tower windows gutter in the wind. Their flames waver, thin and exhausted, as if echoing the breath of the prisoner below. A raven lands upon the battlement, head tilted, listening. The river keeps flowing. The barges keep drifting. Life continues. But somewhere, deep in the stone belly of the fortress, a melody refuses to die. And so the night ends not in silence, but in defiance. A song against chains, a whisper against centuries, a fragile bridge of sound stretching through darkness, daring to reach tomorrow. Snow does not fall here, it descends like a shroud. Each flake drifts with a silence too heavy for beauty, settling upon cobblestone and timber, upon shuttered windows and bowed roofs, cloaking the world in white that glows faintly in the dim winter light. Yet beneath that softness lies an unrest that gnaws at the marrow. The stillness is a mask, and behind it the town suffocates. The wooden beams of houses groan beneath their icy burden. Shutters are nailed closed, not merely against the bite of frost, but against something deeper, darker. Behind those nailed doors, fires burn low, their glow uncertain, their smoke curling upward like muted cries swallowed by heaven. And on the edge of this silent town, the ground has opened its maw. A pit yawns wide, a scar in the frozen earth, its rim lined with crosses carved hastily from oak. The snow weighs them down, bending each like weary mourners who cannot hold their heads aloft. Few walk the streets now. Those who do move in silence, their boots crunching the frost in a rhythm that speaks of resignation. Each step is a tolling bell, each breath a prayer left unspoken. A butcher still sharpens his blade, though no flesh rests upon his block. A blacksmith hammers listlessly at iron that grows cold too soon, sparks leaping only to die before they fall. The air itself is lean, stripped of abundance. Trade has withered, famine has arrived, and pestilence sits like a guest at every table. Even the smell of tallow, once comforting, now mingles with the rancid stench of fear, a sourness that clings to every door, every garment, every breath. Within one dim chamber, a physician bends low over his work. His fur-lined cloak does not shield him from the chill that creeps through stone walls. He dips his quill into frozen ink, scrawling notes that grow heavier with every line. Swellings, coughs, fever, deaths. Each name inscribed is a life extinguished, each mark of his pen a toll for the grave. He tells himself that writing is resistance, that order captured in ink might stand against chaos. But he feels his hand falter. He knows that parchment fills too quickly, that memory itself is no ledger large enough. The pit outside waits, and still it is never deep enough. It is not the plague alone that claims this town, but the silence it leaves behind. For once there was music here. Once, the tavern rang with the lilt of lutes and the stomp of dancing boots. Once, the tower's bell called not to funerals but to feasts. Once, laughter rose like birds across the square. Now, there is only the hiss of wind through shutter cracks, the groan of wood, the crunch of boots carrying bodies toward the pit. The world has forgotten its own voice, and yet, listen, beneath the hush of snow, there is still the faintest echo of what was. A mother hums softly, rocking a child whose eyes stare glassy but still open. A soldier mutters prayers into the dark, though he no longer recalls the words. A dog howls at the pit, a sound too raw to be silenced by frost. Fragments remain, fragile as the flakes that vanish upon the tongue. But snow does not stop. It buries cobblestone, swallows footprints, erases faces carved into wood. It covers the pit's edge, whitening the markers of the dead until even grief becomes indistinguishable from the landscape. Day by day, the town itself becomes a memory half-faded, a painting smudged by cold hands. And so, in the heart of winter, the people live as though they, too, are already ghosts. They move through streets that no longer know their names. They clutch at bread that crumbles too soon, at warmth that flickers and dies. They fear not only death, but the greater death of being forgotten, of becoming another silent town buried beneath white silence, lost before spring can ever thaw the ground. Still the snow falls. Still the pit yawns wider. Still the quill scratches faintly on parchment that will one day crumble like bone. And in the hush of endless white, one cannot help but wonder. When the thaw comes, What will remain? Will the world remember the music that once danced across these streets, or will only the silence endure?